They called it a wedding, but everyone in Durango knew it was a sale. The only question was whether the Apache girl would make it through the ceremony without running, or whether the mountain man everyone feared would drag her into the wilderness and never return. October 15th, 1876. The Mission. San Juan stood small and wooden against the Colorado sky, its bell tower casting a long shadow over Main Street. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smell of old timber. The pews groaned under the weight of bodies that had come not to celebrate, but to witness. On the left side sat the miners and ranchers, men with hard faces and harder hands. Their eyes were cold, watching. 3 of Silas Crane's hired guns leaned against the back wall, hands resting near their holsters. On the right side, a handful of Mexican families sat close together, their Sunday clothes faded but clean. Dr. Helena Wright occupied the front row, spine straight, chin high. Reverend Josiah Webb stood at the altar, his hands trembling as he clutched his Bible. And at the center of it all stood Ayanna. She was 20 years old, dressed in a buckskin dress decorated with turquoise beads, an old shawl from her stepmother draped over her shoulders. Her black hair hung in a long braid down her back, and around her neck she wore a simple turquoise necklace. Her skin was the warm brown of her Apache mother, her eyes the amber gold of her Mexican father. A small scar marked her chin, a memory from a childhood fall. Her hands shook. She twisted the fabric of her shawl just to keep them still, her eyes fixed on the wooden cross behind the reverend because she could not make herself look at the man beside her. Matthias Brennan stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, broad-shouldered and silent. He wore a fringed buckskin coat darkened by weather and wear, his dark hair tied back with a leather cord. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but nothing could hide the scar that ran from his forehead through his left eyebrow and down his cheek. His hands, large and rough as tree bark, rested at his sides. He did not touch his gun. He did not look at Ayanna. His gray eyes stayed fixed on Reverend Webb, cold as winter stone. Whispers moved through the church like wind through grass. Carter's Apache girl. Marrying that killer Brennan. Poor thing. She don't have no choice. Reverend Webb cleared his throat. His voice came out thin and uncertain. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Ayanna felt the weight of every eye on her back. Her father, Thomas Carter, stood near the door, hat in his hands. His eyes were shining, but not with shame, with relief. The gambling debts were cleared. The ranch would not be taken. He would sleep easy tonight while she walked out of this church with a man whose reputation made grown men cross the street. 3 days ago, she had been in her small room at the Carter Ranch, trying to understand how her life had come to this. Thomas had stumbled home from the saloon, drunk and desperate. She had smelled the whiskey on him before he even reached the porch. Rose, her 16-year-old half-sister, had been in the kitchen, and Ayanna had sent her upstairs before their father came through the door. Ayanna. Thomas had grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in too hard. I need to talk to you. She had pulled away. You're drunk. I lost. His voice cracked. At Crane's table. I lost everything. Her stomach had dropped. How much? $1,200. The number had hit her like a physical blow. $1,200. 4 years of wages for a ranch hand. More money than their small ranch would make in 2 seasons. We'll find a way, she had said, even though she knew it was impossible. We'll sell cattle. We'll work harder. Crane don't want cattle. Thomas had looked at her then, really looked at her, and she had seen something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. He wants you. The room had tilted. What? He said the debt's forgiven if you come work in his house, as his housekeeper. The word housekeeper had come out bitter because they both knew what it really meant. No. The word had come out sharp as broken glass. I won't. Then Rose goes hungry. We lose the ranch. We lose everything. I don't care. Ayanna had stepped back, her hands clenched into fists. I will never set foot in that man's house. Never. Thomas had grabbed her shoulders. You think you got a choice? Half-breeds don't get to say no to white men in this territory. That's the law. She had jerked away from him. Then the law is wrong. But the law was the law, and she had no power to change it. The next day, Sheriff Duncan Hayes had ridden up into the San Juan Mountains. It took him 8 hours on horseback, following narrow trails that most men did not know existed. When he finally found Matthias Brennan's cabin, the sun was low and the air was bitter cold. Matt had been checking his trap line, walking the familiar paths through pine and aspen. He had seen Hayes coming from half a mile away. Visitors were rare. Visitors in uniform were never good news. Brennan? Hayes had dismounted, his breath making clouds in the cold air. Sheriff. Matt's voice was rough from disuse. He spoke so rarely up here that sometimes he forgot what his own voice sounded like. Long ride for a social call. This ain't social. Hayes had pulled an envelope from his coat. You remember Diego Ramirez? Matt had gone very still. I remember. Diego saved my life at Chapultepec in 1847. Took a bullet meant for me. Hayes had looked at Matt with hard eyes. He saved your life too, didn't he? That blizzard in '56? Matt had nodded slowly. 20 years ago he had been caught in a late spring storm, half frozen and delirious. Diego had found him, brought him to the ranch, kept him alive for 3 days while the snow piled up outside. When Matt had finally been strong enough to ride, Diego had given him supplies and a message. One day, if my daughter needs help, you remember this. You help her. Matt had never forgotten. Diego's daughter is in trouble, Hayes had said. Silas Crane is calling in Thomas Carter's debts. $1,200. Carter can't pay. Crane wants the girl instead. Matt's hands had clenched. Wants her how? How do you think? Hayes had spat into the snow. Says she'll work in his house. We both know what that means. And the law? Law says if Carter agrees to hand her over as payment for debt, ain't nothing I can do. Hayes had looked away. But there is one thing Crane can't touch. A legal marriage. If she's married, she belongs to her husband, not her father. Crane can't claim her. Matt had stared at the mountains. You're asking me to marry her. I'm asking you to save her. Like Diego saved us. Matt had stood there in the cold, thinking of Diego's kindness, thinking of his own brother, Samuel, who had loved an Apache girl named Kaya 20 years ago, thinking of how Crane's men had killed Samuel for that love. I'll do it, he had said. I'll come down. Have the papers ready. Now, 3 days later, he stood in a church that smelled of fear and judgment, about to marry a woman he had never spoken to. Reverend Webb's voice pulled Ayanna back to the present. Ayanna Ramirez Carter, do you take Matthias Brennan to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part? The church went silent, every breath held, every eye watching. For one wild moment, Ayanna thought of running. She could bolt down the aisle, past her father's guilty face, out into the October cold. She could run and never look back. But where would she go? Her mother was buried on the hill behind the ranch. Rose needed food and shelter. There was no place in this hard country for a runaway Apache girl. She lifted her chin. Her voice came out small but steady. I do. A murmur rippled through the church like water disturbed by a thrown stone. Reverend Webb turned to the man beside her. Matthias Brennan, do you take Ayanna Ramirez Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part? Matthias did not hesitate. His voice was low and rough, like gravel rolling in a stream. I do. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you man and wife. Webb closed his Bible with shaking hands. "You may kiss the bride." Ayanna's breath caught. She had not thought past this moment. She had not imagined his mouth on hers, his hands touching her. Matthias stepped closer. She could smell pine smoke and leather on him, the cold air of the mountains clinging to his coat. His hand lifted. She flinched. The church noticed. A few women tutted. A miner snickered. For a long moment Matthias just stood there looking at her. Then, instead of grabbing her or forcing a kiss, he bent his head and brushed the lightest touch against her forehead. It was barely more than the brush of a feather, whisper soft. The church gasped. Matthias leaned down, his mouth near her ear. His voice was so quiet only she could hear. "You're free to leave whenever you want. This is just paper." Ayanna's eyes went wide. She stared up at him, trying to understand. They walked down the aisle together, her hand resting on his arm. The townspeople parted. Some nodded. Some stared. Some whispered about the strange, gentle kiss from a man with a killer's name. Outside, the October sky was heavy with clouds. The wind cut sharp and cold down Main Street. Matthias led her to a wagon loaded with supplies, a bay horse hitched to the front, and a second mare tied behind. Behind them, the church doors opened. Thomas Carter came out, adjusting his hat. He walked up to Matthias and clapped him on the shoulder, not even looking at Ayanna. "Much obliged, Brennan. You got yourself a good worker there. Girl knows how to keep a house." Ayanna's cheeks burned with shame. Matthias turned his head slowly. When he spoke, his voice had gone cold as mountain ice. "She is not a worker. She is my wife." Thomas's smile faltered. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and said nothing. Silas Crane stood on the church steps, watching. He was 45 years old, gray-haired and sharp-faced, dressed in a black suit with a silver-topped cane in his hand. His pale eyes were fixed on Ayanna like a snake watching a mouse. "Brennan," Crane's voice carried across the street, "the girl still owes her father $200 for Margaret's funeral expenses. I bought that debt this morning." Matthias did not turn around. "Paid in full this morning. Ask Hayes." "Half-breeds can't refuse white men under territorial law," Crane said, his voice tight with anger. "That's how things work here." This time Matthias did turn. His gray eyes locked onto Crane's pale ones. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She is my wife," Matthias said, each word deliberate. "Not property, not a servant, a woman with her own voice and her own rights under law." The two men stared at each other across the dusty street. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. Then Matthias turned away. He helped Ayanna up into the wagon seat, his large hands gentle at her waist, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. She was surprised by the care in his touch. She had expected roughness. Matthias climbed up beside her and took the reins. As the wagon began to roll, Rose came running from the church, her face wet with tears. "Ayanna!" She grabbed her sister's hand. "Will you be all right?" Ayanna looked at her little sister, then at the silent man beside her. "I just married the most dangerous man in Colorado. I don't think all right is the right word." To her complete shock, Matthias made a sound. It took her a moment to realize it was laughter, rough and unpracticed, like a skill he had forgotten how to use. "At least you're honest," he said. The wagon rolled out of Durango, leaving the church and the whispers behind. The road climbed steadily into the foothills, winding through stands of pine and aspen. The leaves were turning gold, and they fell like coins in the wind. They rode in silence for an hour. Ayanna kept her hands folded in her lap, acutely aware of the man beside her. He did not try to touch her. He did not even look at her. He just drove the wagon with steady hands, his eyes on the trail ahead. "You scared of me?" he said finally. Ayanna swallowed. "I don't know you, but you know what people say. I know they call you a killer." He nodded slowly. "They're not wrong." She looked at him sharply. "Are you trying to frighten me?" "No." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes besides coldness. "I'm trying to be honest. I killed 3 men 20 years ago, in a saloon in Durango. They deserved it, but that don't change the fact that they're dead." "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Why did you kill them?" "Because they killed someone I loved." The words hung in the air between them. Ayanna did not know what to say to that. The sun was sinking low when they passed through a grove of aspens. Beyond the trees, she saw stone markers, an Apache burial ground. "Stop!" Her voice came out sharp. Matthias pulled the wagon to a halt without question. Ayanna climbed down and walked into the burial ground. The stones were old, weathered by wind and snow. She found the one she was looking for and knelt beside it. From a small pouch at her belt, she pulled out a pinch of tobacco. She placed it carefully on the grave and whispered words in Apache, words her mother had taught her long ago. When she stood and turned back toward the wagon, she saw that Matthias had climbed down. He was standing at the edge of the burial ground, his hat in his hands, his head bowed in respect. She walked back to him. "My mother," she said. "Her name was Kaya." Matthias went absolutely still. His face had gone pale beneath his beard. "Kaya?" "Yes." Ayanna touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. "Why? Do you know that name?" His voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. "My brother. He loved a girl named Kaya." The world seemed to tilt. Ayanna stared at him. "What was your brother's name?" "Samuel. Samuel Brennan." Her hand flew to her mouth. "No, that's not possible." "Did your mother have a turquoise necklace?" Matthias asked. His hands were shaking. "Did she speak Apache and Spanish? Did she marry a man named Diego Ramirez?" "Yes." Ayanna's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, but Diego wasn't my real father. He found me. My mother died when I was born. She and the baby's father. Both died." Matthias took a step toward her. "Kaya was pregnant when my brother died. Crane's men killed Samuel because he loved an Apache woman. They called it a crime against white families. Diego found her after. He brought her to his ranch, but she died in childbirth. The baby died too. That's what he told me." "No." Ayanna shook her head. "I didn't die. Diego raised me. He saved me." Understanding crashed over them both like a wave. "You're Samuel's daughter," Matthias whispered, "and you're my uncle." They stood in the fading light, 2 people bound by blood they had not known they shared, married by law to save a life. Matthias's face twisted with emotion. "I didn't know. Diego never told me. I thought the baby died. I thought everything died with Samuel and Kaya. He saved me." Ayanna wiped at her tears. "He raised me as his own. He never told anyone the truth. He protected me. That's why Hayes came to me." Matthias looked toward the mountains. "Diego made me promise. 10 years ago, when he saved my life, he made me promise that if his daughter ever needed help, I would be there. I thought he meant a daughter that came later. I didn't know he meant you." They climbed back into the wagon without another word. But something had changed between them. They were no longer 2 strangers forced together. They were family, bound by grief and blood and the memory of people they had both loved. The cabin appeared as the last light faded from the sky. It was built snug against a rock outcrop, smoke curling from the chimney. It was small but solid, built to withstand hard winters. Matthias pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down. He came around to help Ayanna, and this time when his hand circled her waist to lift her down, she did not flinch. "Welcome home," he said quietly. The word home felt strange and fragile in her chest. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A stone fireplace held a steady fire. A rough-hewn table with 2 chairs sat near the window. Shelves lined one wall, holding jars and tools and supplies. Against the far wall was a narrow bed with a thick quilt. Above it, tucked in the rafters, was a loft space. Ayanna stood in the doorway, her small trunk of belongings still on the wagon outside. Matthias carried the trunk in and set it at the foot of the bed. "You take the bed," he said. "I sleep in the loft." She looked up at the loft, then back at him. "Why?" "Because you're my brother's daughter." His voice was firm. "Because I didn't save you to control you. You'll be safe here. I won't touch you unless you ask. We can be strangers under one roof, or we can be family. That's your choice. But I won't let Crane lay a finger on you. That's my word." Ayanna felt something crack open in her chest. All her life, men had made decisions for her. Her father had sold her to pay his debts. Crane had tried to buy her like property. But this man, this killer everyone feared, was giving her a choice. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you really come down from the mountain?" He looked at the fire, his profile sharp in the flickering light. "Because Diego saved my life. Because Samuel loved your mother. Because I couldn't save them, but maybe I could save you." He turned to face her. "And because Crane killed my brother. This isn't charity, Ayanna. This is a debt I owed to the dead. But that doesn't mean you're not free." She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her legs felt weak. "Crane won't let this go. I know. He'll find a way to fight back. I know that too." She looked up at him. "Then what do we do?" For the first time since she had met him, Matthias Brennan smiled. It was small and fierce. "This time we don't run. This time we stand and fight. Together." In Durango, 15 miles away, Silas Crane sat alone in his office above the saloon. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on his desk. In his hand was a pen, and before him was a sheet of paper. He wrote carefully, each word chosen with precision. When he finished, he folded the letter and sealed it with wax. On the envelope he wrote a single name, Judge Maxwell, Denver. He smiled. The law might protect a married woman from being claimed as property, but the law could also be used to prove that a marriage was forced, that a half-breed girl had been kidnapped, that a known killer had committed a crime. Crane rang a small bell and one of his men appeared in the doorway. "Ride to Denver," Crane said, handing over the letter. "Give this to Judge Maxwell personally. Tell him Silas Crane needs a favor. Remind him he owes me $500 from the railroad investment." The man took the letter and vanished into the night. Crane poured himself another whiskey and looked out the window toward the dark mountains. He had built his empire on debt and control. He had crushed better men than Matthias Brennan. One Apache girl and one mountain man would not stop him. He would have what was his. The morning came cold and clear. Ayanna woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood outside the cabin. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory rushed back. The wedding. The mountain. The man who was both stranger and uncle. She dressed quickly in her buckskin dress and stepped outside. Matthias stood by the woodpile, his coat thrown over a stump, his shirt sleeves rolled up despite the cold. His arms moved with practiced rhythm, the axe rising and falling, splitting logs with clean precision. Steam rose from his skin in the morning air. He saw her and stopped. "Coffee's hot," he said, nodding toward the cabin. "Bacon and cornmeal if you're hungry." She nodded and went back inside. The coffee was strong and bitter, the bacon crisp. She ate standing by the window, watching him work. His movements were efficient, economical, no wasted motion. The actions of a man who had lived alone for a long time. When he came back inside, she had already washed the dishes and was examining the shelves. Jars of preserved vegetables, dried meat, herbs she recognized from her mother's teachings. And there, tucked in the corner, a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. "Don't," Matthias said sharply. She turned. His face had gone hard. "That was Samuel's," he said. "I keep it, but I don't open it." She lowered her hand. "I'm sorry." He was quiet for a long moment. Then his shoulders dropped. "No, I'm sorry. You have a right to see it. You're his daughter." He crossed the room and lifted the bundle down with careful hands. He unwrapped the leather slowly, revealing its contents: a small book of poetry, a wooden flute, a turquoise ring, and a drawing, done in charcoal, of a young woman with long dark hair and kind eyes. "Your mother," Matthias said quietly. "Samuel drew this 3 months before he died. He was going to marry her properly, with a church wedding and everything. Diego was going to give her away." Ayanna touched the drawing with trembling fingers. She had never seen an image of her mother. Diego had told her stories, but stories were not the same as seeing a face. "She was beautiful," Ayanna whispered. "She was strong," Matthias corrected. "Samuel said she could track a deer through water and shoot a bow as good as any warrior. She taught him Apache ways. He taught her to read English. They were happy. Until Crane. Until Crane." They stood together in the quiet cabin, connected by ghosts. On the morning of the 15th day, Ayanna was outside hauling water from the stream when Matthias suddenly went rigid. His hand dropped to his gun. "Get inside," he said quietly. "What is it?" "Rider. Coming fast." She looked where he was looking and saw nothing, but she trusted him. She set down the water bucket and moved toward the cabin. Then she saw it, a figure on horseback moving through the trees. But the rider was not coming up the main trail. He was coming from the east, through the thick forest where no white man would know to travel. The rider emerged into the clearing. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with gray-streaked black hair and a face carved by wind and sun. He wore traditional Apache clothing, buckskin and turquoise, and carried a bow across his back. He rode an Appaloosa with the easy confidence of a man born to the saddle. "Naiche," Ayanna breathed. The old man's eyes found her. He spoke in rapid Apache, his voice sharp as a knife edge. Ayanna answered in the same language. Matthias could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Anger, accusation, challenge. The old man dismounted and walked toward them. His hand rested on the long knife at his belt. Matthias did not move, did not reach for his gun. He stood perfectly still, waiting. "Chu Naiche," Ayanna said, switching to English. "This is my husband." "Husband." The old man spat the word. "White husband. The brother of the man who loved my mother." Naiche's eyes narrowed. He studied Matthias with the intensity of a hawk watching prey. "You are brother to Samuel Brennan?" "I am," Matthias said. "Samuel was good man, brave, respectful." Naiche's hand tightened on his knife hilt. "But you, they say you are killer. They say you dragged my niece into the mountains." "They're wrong," Ayanna said. "He saved me from Silas Crane." "So you say." Naiche turned his gaze on her. "How do I know you speak truth? How do I know fear does not bend your words?" "Because I am telling you the truth," Ayanna said firmly. "Crane wanted to own me. Matthias married me to protect me. That is all." Naiche studied them both for a long time. The morning wind moved through the pines. Somewhere a crow called. Finally Naiche spoke. "If you speak truth, white man, you will prove it. You will hunt with me. 3 days, no gun, only bow and knife, Apache way. If you survive, if you show respect, I will accept. If not," he smiled without humor, "then the mountains will have another grave." Matthias did not hesitate. "When do we leave?" "Now." "No," Ayanna said sharply. "Chu, he needs to prepare. He needs supplies." "Warrior needs nothing but skill and courage." Naiche looked at Matthias. "Unless you are afraid?" "I'm not afraid," Matthias said. "But I'd be a fool to go into the wilderness unprepared. Give me 2 hours." Naiche considered this. 1 hour, then we go." He walked back to his horse and sat down in the shade to wait. Ayanna grabbed Matthias's arm. "You can't do this. You don't know these mountains like he does. You'll die out there." "Maybe," Matthias said. But if I don't go, he'll never trust me. And we need him, Ayanna. When Crane comes, and he will come, we'll need allies. You need to live first." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "You're worried about me." "Of course I am. You're—" She stopped. "I'm what?" "Your family," she said quietly. "You're all I have." Something shifted in his expression. The hardness softened just slightly. "I'll come back," he said. "I promise." She went inside and began to pack. Jerky, dried corn, water skin, a small pouch of healing herbs. Matthias checked his old bow, the one that had belonged to Samuel. The string was worn but still good. He had arrows, handmade, fletched with hawk feathers. Ayanna came to stand behind him. "Samuel taught you to shoot?" "He tried. I was never as good as him." "Let me see." He picked up the bow and nocked an arrow. She watched his grip, his stance. Then she stepped closer and adjusted his hand position, moving his fingers slightly. "Like this," she said. Her hand covered his. "Feel the difference?" He did. The bow felt more balanced, more natural. "Where did you learn this?" "My mother. She taught me before she died. Diego said I was shooting by the time I could walk." They stood like that for a moment, her hand on his, both of them breathing the same cold mountain air. It was the first time they had been this close by choice. "Ayanna," he said quietly, "if I don't come back, there are papers in the tin box under the floorboard by the bed. The cabin's yours. Everything's yours. You can sell it, keep it, do whatever you want. You'll be free." "Don't talk like that." "I have to, just in case." She turned him to face her. "Then hear this. I don't want the cabin. I don't want freedom if it means you're dead. So you come back. That's an order." He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Didn't know you cared, Mrs. Brennan. Don't let it go to your head." When the hour was up, Matthias and Nietzsche rode into the wilderness. Ayanna stood in the clearing and watched them disappear into the trees. The silence they left behind was heavier than stone. She tried to keep busy. She checked the traps. She gathered firewood. She cleaned the cabin until every surface gleamed. But the hours crawled by like wounded things, and her mind would not rest. On the second day, she went to the burial ground. She sat by her mother's grave and spoke in Apache, the old words coming easier now. She asked for protection. She asked for guidance. She asked the spirits to watch over the stubborn white man who carried her uncle's blood. On the third day, she could not eat. She paced the cabin like a caged animal. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like riders coming. When the sun began to set, she knew in her bones that something was wrong. 3 days, Nietzsche had said. They should have been back by noon. She checked the rifle, loaded it, and set it by the door. If Matthias was hurt, if Nietzsche had killed him, she would go after them. She would find them even if it took all night. The last light was fading when she heard hoofbeats. She grabbed the rifle and ran outside. 2 riders emerged from the trees. Nietzsche on his Appaloosa, and Matthias, alive, riding the bay mare. Across the back of his saddle lay a large elk, freshly killed. Ayanna dropped the rifle and ran. She reached Matthias as he dismounted. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him. He stiffened in surprise, then slowly, carefully, his arms came around her. "You came back," she said into his chest. "Told you I would." She pulled back, suddenly aware of what she had done. "I was worried. I noticed." His eyes were warm. "Glad you care." Nietzsche dismounted and walked over. He looked between them and nodded slowly. "You were right, niece. He has warrior heart." "What happened?" Ayanna asked. "We tracked elk for 2 days," Nietzsche said. "On 3rd day we found grizzly at stream. I told him to kill it. Test of courage." Ayanna's eyes went wide. "You killed a bear with a bow?" "No," Matthias said. "I let it go." You refused? She looked at Nietzsche. And you didn't kill him for refusing? Nietzsche smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. I told him to kill Bear. He said no. Said Bear was not attacking, so killing was not necessary. Said killing without reason makes you murderer, not warrior. He clapped Matthias on the shoulder. Samuel taught him well. A man who knows when not to kill is stronger than man who kills everything. Then we found the elk, Matthias said. I made the shot, clean kill, and I did the prayer the way Samuel taught me. Nietzsche nodded. He honored the animal, honored our ways. I accept him. Relief flooded through Ayanna so powerfully she felt dizzy. And now, Nietzsche said, pulling 2 small leather pouches from his belt, I give you both protection. He handed one to Ayanna, one to Matthias. Medicine bags, made by my sister, your grandmother. Keep them close. They will guard you in the war that comes. War? Matthias asked. The pale-eyed man in the town, Crane, he will not stop. He is like winter. He takes and takes until nothing lives. Nietzsche looked at them both seriously. I will teach you to fight as Apache fight, not stand and shoot like white soldiers. Move like shadows, strike like lightning, disappear like smoke. When do we start? Matthias asked. Tomorrow, but tonight we feast. Nietzsche grinned. It has been long time since I had elk. They roasted meat over the fire. Nietzsche told stories in Apache, which Ayanna translated for Matthias. Stories of warriors and spirits, of battles won through cleverness rather than strength. Matthias listened with the intensity of a man memorizing scripture. As the fire burned low, Nietzsche grew serious. There is thing you must know, he said, about Crane, about why he hates so much. We know, Ayanna said. His wife died in a Ute raid. He blames all native people. No, Nietzsche shook his head. That is lie, he tells. Truth is different. His wife Sarah did die, but not in raid. She ran away. She was going to leave him, take their son, and go east to her family. Matthias leaned forward. What happened? Crane found her on the road, brought her back. 3 days later, she was dead. Doctor said sickness. But Apache who worked in his house said they heard screaming, saw bruises. Nietzsche's face was grim. Crane killed his own wife, then blamed Utes to cover his crime, to make himself victim. The fire crackled in the silence. How do you know this? Because the Apache who saw was my sister, your mother, he said to Ayanna. Kaya worked in Crane's house before she met Samuel. She saw truth. She tried to tell Diego. That is when Crane began to hate her. Matthias asked. Because the Apache who saw was my sister, your mother, he said to Ayanna. Kaya worked in Crane's house before she met Samuel. She saw Sarah Crane's bruises. She heard the screams. She knew the truth of how that woman died. He paused, his face grave. Kaya was the only witness who could destroy Crane's lie about the Ute raid. She was the only one who knew he murdered his own wife. That is why Crane hated her. That is why, when Samuel loved her, Crane saw it as perfect opportunity. Opportunity for what? Matthias asked, though dread filled his voice. To silence the witness and punish the white man who dared love Apache woman. 2 birds, 1 stone. Nietzsche's eyes were hard. He killed Samuel and hoped Kaya would die in childbirth. When Diego saved you, he nodded at Ayanna, Crane tried to kill Diego too. When that failed, he tried to make you suffer as your mother suffered. This is not just about control. This is about erasing everyone who knows his secret. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. Crane's obsession, his cruelty, his need to control and destroy. He's done this before, Ayanna said slowly. To your mother, to Diego, to Samuel, now to us. He destroys anyone who knows his secret. Then we must be smarter than he is, Matthias said. Stronger, and we must make sure the truth comes out before he can silence us. A sound made them all freeze. Hoofbeats, coming fast up the trail from Durango. Matthias and Nietzsche both grabbed their weapons. Ayanna moved to the cabin door. A single rider burst into the clearing. Sheriff Hayes, his horse lathered with sweat, his face grim in the firelight. "Matt," he gasped, "I rode straight through, 12 hours, had to warn you." "What happened?" Hayes dismounted, his legs shaking with exhaustion. "Crane sent a letter to Judge Maxwell in Denver, claims you kidnapped Ayanna, claims the marriage was forced. Judge issued a warrant. You have to come back to Durango in 5 days for trial. If you don't—" He looked at Ayanna. "They'll say she's being held hostage. They'll send federal marshals to take her back." The night seemed to grow colder. "It's a trap," Nietzsche said. "Crane wants to separate you, get you into his town where he has power." "I know," Matthias said, "but if I don't go, Ayanna loses everything. They'll drag her back and Crane will claim her as a ward of the court." "Then I'll testify," Ayanna said. "I'll tell the truth." "Crane will have his own witnesses," Hayes said. "Your father, for one. Thomas came to see me yesterday. Crane's offered to forgive his remaining debts if he testifies you were forced." Ayanna felt like she had been punched. "My father would do that? Again?" "Your father's a weak man who loves gambling more than his children," Hayes said bluntly. "I'm sorry, but you need to know what you're facing." Matthias stood and began to pace. "If we run, we prove Crane right. If we fight on his ground with his judge and his jury." "Not his jury," Hayes said. "Not entirely. There are good people in Durango, people who remember Diego, people who are tired of Crane's control." He pulled out a folded paper. "I've been talking to folks. Doc Helena Wright said she'll testify. Says she's examined women who worked for Crane and the evidence isn't pretty. Reverend Webb is scared, but he might speak up. And there are 3 Mexican families who'll swear Diego was a good man and his daughter deserves respect." "That's not enough to beat Crane," Matthias said. "No," Hayes agreed. "But it's a start. And if Ayanna testifies herself, if she stands up in that courtroom and tells her truth—" He looked at her. "You're Diego's daughter. You're educated, articulate. You're not what they expect. That might be enough to swing the jury." Ayanna felt everyone's eyes on her. The weight of the decision pressed down like a physical thing. "It's dangerous," Matthias said to her. "If it goes wrong, you could end up with Crane anyway." "And if I don't go, I'll always be running," Ayanna replied. "Always looking over my shoulder, always afraid." She straightened her spine. "This is my marriage, my life. I have a right to speak for myself." Matthias studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. We go together. We tell the truth. And we trust that justice still means something in Colorado." Nietzsche stood. "And I will come. I will stand outside courthouse with Bo. They may not let Apache inside, but they will see me. They will know this woman is not alone." Hayes took a deep breath. 5 days. That's all we have to prepare. We need to get testimony written down, make sure Doc Helena has her medical records ready, coach Ayanna on what to say. He looked at Matthias. "And you need to be ready for Crane to try something outside the courtroom. He's not a man who accepts defeat gracefully." That night, after Hayes had been given food and a place to sleep in the loft, Ayanna and Matthias sat by the dying fire. "You don't have to do this," he said. "We could run. Head to California or Oregon. Start over where Crane can't reach us." "And live as fugitives forever? Always hiding?" She shook her head. "My father taught me that dignity comes from standing up, not running away. I won't let Crane take that from me." "You're braver than most men I've known." She looked at him in the firelight. "I'm terrified." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you're scared." "Is that what you did? When you killed those men in the saloon?" His face went distant. "I was angry. Broken. Samuel was dead and I wanted someone to pay. That wasn't brave. That was rage." He met her eyes. But this, what you're doing, standing up in front of a town that looks down on you and speaking your truth, that's real courage." She reached out and took his hand. His skin was rough and warm. "Whatever happens, I'm glad you came down from the mountain." "So am I," he said quietly. They sat together in the darkness, hand in hand, while outside the wind moved through the pines and carried the scent of coming snow. In 5 days, they would face Silas Crane and all his power. They would stand before a judge and jury and fight for the right to choose their own lives. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. They were together. And for now, that was enough. 5 days was not much time to prepare for a war. They worked through the daylight hours and into the darkness, Hayes writing testimony by lamplight while Matthias and Ayanna went over every detail of their story. Naichi spent his time teaching them things that might save their lives: how to move silently, how to watch for ambush, how to read the intentions of men by the way they held their bodies. "Crane will not fight fair," Naichi said on the second day. They were outside the cabin, and he was showing them hand signals used by Apache scouts. "He will smile in courthouse and send killers in the dark. You must be ready for both." Ayanna practiced loading a pistol while blindfolded, her fingers learning the weight and feel of each piece. Matthias worked on quick draw techniques he had not used in 5 years. His hands remembered, even if his heart had tried to forget. On the third day, Hayes rode down to Durango to speak with their potential witnesses. He returned late at night, his face drawn. "Doc Helena is ready," he said. "She's got medical records from 3 women who worked at Crane's ranch. The evidence is damning. Bruises, broken bones, one woman who tried to hang herself." He paused. "But Reverend Webb is scared. He wants to help, but Crane holds the mortgage on the church. Webb's afraid he'll lose everything." "Can we win without him?" Matthias asked. "Maybe, but it would be easier with a man of God speaking on your side." Hayes poured himself coffee with shaking hands. "There's something else. Thomas Carter came to see me today. He knows what Crane wants him to say, and he's going to say it." Ayanna felt something break inside her chest. She had known it was coming, had prepared herself for her father's betrayal, but knowing and feeling were different things. "He looked sick about it," Hayes added quietly, "but not sick enough to say no." "He never could say no to anything," Ayanna said bitterly. "Not to cards, not to whiskey, not to men who offered him a way out of his debts." Matthias put a hand on her shoulder. "His weakness is not your shame. But I'm the one who'll pay for it. Not if we tell the story better than he does." On the 4th day, they rehearsed. Hayes played the role of Crane's lawyer, firing questions designed to confuse and intimidate. Ayanna answered each one, her voice growing stronger with practice. "How do we know you weren't forced into this marriage?" "Because I'm telling you I wasn't." "But you were afraid of Silas Crane, weren't you?" "Yes, and I'm still afraid of him. But fear is not the same as force. I chose Matthias Brennan. That choice is mine, and no one can take it from me." Hayes nodded approval. "Good. Keep that strength. Let them see you're not a victim. You're a woman making decisions about her own life." That night, Ayanna could not sleep. She lay in the bed staring at the ceiling beams while Matthias kept watch by the window. The trial started tomorrow. By this time tomorrow night, her future would be decided by 12 men who did not know her and might not care. "You should rest," Matthias said from across the room. "I can't." He was quiet for a moment. Then she heard him move. He came and sat on the edge of the bed, careful to keep distance between them. "When I was a boy," he said, "maybe 8 or 9, my father took me hunting. We tracked a buck for 2 days through snow and ice. On the 3rd day, we finally cornered it. My father handed me his rifle, told me to take the shot." Ayanna turned to look at him. "Did you?" I froze. The buck was looking right at me. Big brown eyes. I couldn't pull the trigger. What did your father do? He took the rifle back and made the shot himself. Then he told me something I never forgot. He said courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when your hands are shaking. Are your hands shaking now? She asked. He held one up. It trembled slightly in the lamplight. They haven't stopped shaking since Hayes brought that warrant. She reached out and took his hand. Then we'll shake together. He squeezed her hand gently. You're going to be magnificent tomorrow. They won't know what hit them. I hope you're right. I am, because you're Diego's daughter, and Samuel's daughter, and those were two of the best men I ever knew. He stood to go back to his post. Try to sleep. Tomorrow's a long ride. She did sleep finally, and in her dreams she saw her mother standing on a hilltop with the wind in her hair, smiling down at her. They left before dawn. Matthias, Ayanna, and Hayes rode together, while Naichi took a different route through the backcountry. He would arrive in Durango separately, making sure Crane's men did not know he was coming. The ride down the mountain was quiet. The sky was heavy with clouds that promised snow before nightfall. The aspens had lost most of their leaves, and the branches looked like bones against the gray sky. As they descended into the foothills, they began to see signs of civilization. Fence lines, cattle grazing, smoke from distant chimneys. The world of men pressing back against the wilderness. They reached Durango just after noon. The town was bigger than it had been 2 weeks ago, swollen with people who had come to witness the trial. Every hitching post was full, every boarding house packed. This was the biggest news to hit the territory in months. The mountain man and his Apache bride against Silas Crane. People stopped and stared as they rode down Main Street. Some faces were hostile, others curious. A few showed something that might have been sympathy. Hayes led them to his small house behind the courthouse. "You'll stay here," he said. "It's not much, but it's safe. I've got deputies watching. Crane's men won't try anything this close to the jail." Ayanna looked out the window at the courthouse across the street. It was a 2-story building with white painted wood and tall windows. Tomorrow morning, she would walk through those doors and fight for her freedom. "I want to see Rose," she said suddenly. Hayes hesitated. "Your father's house is on the north edge of town. Crane's men might be watching." "I don't care. She's my sister. I need to see her before this starts." Matthias stood. "Then we'll go together." They walked through town as the afternoon light began to fade. People watched from windows and doorways. Some whispered, some pointed. Ayanna kept her head high, her hand resting lightly on Matthias's arm. The Carter house was small and weathered, paint peeling from the boards. The porch sagged slightly. Everything looked tired and worn, like Thomas Carter himself. Ayanna knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. Rose stood there, her eyes red from crying. When she saw her sister, she burst into fresh tears and threw her arms around her. "I thought you wouldn't come," Rose sobbed. "I thought you'd run away, and I'd never see you again." "I'm here," Ayanna said, holding her tight. "I'm here and I'm fighting." They sat in the small kitchen while Rose made coffee with shaking hands. Thomas was not home. He was at Crane's saloon, Rose said, rehearsing his testimony, drinking away his conscience. "He's going to lie about you," Rose said. "He told me last night. Said Crane's paying him to say you were forced. He tried to make it sound like he had no choice, but I know better. He always has a choice. He just always makes the wrong one." "It's not your fault," Ayanna said. "I know, but I still hate him for it." Rose looked at Matthias, who stood quietly by the door. "Is he good to you? Does he hurt you?" "No," Ayanna said. "He's kind. He's honorable. He's everything Father never was." Rose nodded slowly. Then she went to a drawer and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. She handed it to Ayanna. "Mother Margaret gave this to me before she died. She said to give it to you when you needed it most." Ayanna unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small wooden cross on a leather cord. Simple, plain, but carved with care. She wanted you to know you were loved, Rose said, even though she wasn't your real mother. She wanted you to know you mattered. Ayanna's eyes filled with tears. She put the cross around her neck. Thank you. They talked for another hour about small things and memories, about the time they caught frogs in the creek, about Mother Margaret's apple pie, about Diego teaching them to ride horses before they could walk. When it was time to go, Rose walked them to the door. Win tomorrow, she said fiercely. Win and show everyone in this town that we don't have to accept what men like Crane decide for us. I'll try. Don't try. Do it. Walking back through the darkening streets, Ayanna felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for Rose, for every woman who had ever been treated like property, for every one Crane had ever crushed under his boot. When they reached Hayes's house, Nietzsche was waiting in the shadows. He stepped into the light, his face grim. I scouted the town, he said. Crane has 6 men, all armed. They watch courthouse during day. At night, 3 stay at his saloon, 3 patrol streets. Are they planning something? Matthias asked. Always planning. Question is when. Nietzsche looked at Ayanna. You are brave to do this, niece. Your mother would be proud. My mother would probably tell me I'm crazy. Yes, and then she would stand beside you anyway. They ate a simple dinner that none of them tasted. Hayes went over the order of proceedings one more time. Opening statements, Crane's witnesses, their witnesses, closing arguments. Then the jury would deliberate. Could be an hour, Hayes said. Could be days. Depends on how divided they are. What are our chances? Ayanna asked. Hayes did not answer right away. Honest? 50-50. Maybe less. Judge Maxwell is in Crane's pocket. But the jury is regular folks. Some of them knew Diego. Some of them are tired of Crane running everything. If they see you as a real person instead of just a half-breed, we might have a shot. 50-50. Ayanna thought about those odds as she lay in the small guest bedroom that night, listening to the sounds of the town settling into sleep. 50-50 meant she had as much chance of losing as winning. 50-50 meant tomorrow night she might be free, or she might be Crane's property. She touched the wooden cross at her throat and whispered a prayer to a God she was not sure was listening. Morning came too fast. Ayanna dressed carefully in her buckskin dress, the turquoise necklace, the wooden cross. She braided her hair the way her mother had taught her. When she looked in the small mirror, she saw 3 women staring back. Kaya, who had loved a white man and died for it. Margaret, who had loved a daughter not her own. And herself, about to walk into a courtroom and demand to be seen as human. They walked to the courthouse through streets already crowded with spectators. The trial started at 9. It was 8:30 now, and people jostled for position, hoping to get a seat inside. As they approached the courthouse steps, a figure stepped out of the crowd. Silas Crane, dressed in his finest black suit, silver cane gleaming in the morning light, his pale eyes fixed on Ayanna like a snake watching a mouse. Miss Ramirez, he said, his voice smooth as oil, how kind of you to come willingly. Saves me the trouble of having you dragged back in chains. Her name is Mrs. Brennan, Matthias said coldly, and she's here because she has nothing to hide. We'll see about that, Crane smiled, showing too many teeth. I'm looking forward to hearing what her father has to say. Family testimony carries a lot of weight with juries. Ayanna felt her stomach twist, but she kept her voice steady. My father is a weak man who sold his daughter twice to save himself. The jury will see that. Crane's smile faltered slightly. Careful, girl. Disrespecting your father won't win you any sympathy. I don't want sympathy, Ayanna said. I want justice. She walked past him up the courthouse steps, her hand on Matthias's arm. Behind her, she heard Crane's cane tap against the ground, a sound like a countdown clock. The courtroom was packed. Every bench filled, people standing along the walls, more crowding in the doorway. The air was hot and close despite the autumn cold outside. It smelled of wool and sweat and anticipation. At the front of the room sat Judge Arthur Maxwell, a man of perhaps 50 with gray hair and hard eyes. He watched them enter with an expression that revealed nothing. Crane's lawyer was a thin man named Horace Finch, with a pointed face and quick hands. He smiled at Ayanna as she took her seat, and the smile made her skin crawl. Hayes sat beside them at the defendant's table, his law books stacked in front of him. He was not a lawyer, but territorial law allowed him to serve as advocate. He looked nervous but determined. Across the aisle, Crane sat at the prosecutor's table with Finch, looking supremely confident. Behind him sat 4 of his hired guns, their eyes constantly moving, watching. Outside the courthouse, visible through the tall windows, Naichi sat on his horse. He had his bow across his lap, his face painted with traditional warrior marks. He could not come inside, but he made sure everyone could see him. A reminder that Ayanna was not alone. Judge Maxwell banged his gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Court is now in session," he said. "The Territory of Colorado versus Matthias Brennan, charged with kidnapping and forced marriage. Mr. Finch, your opening statement." Finch stood smoothly. He buttoned his jacket and turned to face the jury. 12 men, all white, ranging in age from perhaps 30 to 60, ranchers and miners and shopkeepers, the people who would decide Ayanna's fate. "Gentlemen of the jury," Finch began, his voice carrying easily through the packed room. "This is a simple case. A known killer took advantage of a desperate situation to force a young woman into marriage. Matthias Brennan is a man who murdered 3 people 20 years ago in a saloon brawl. He has lived as a hermit in the mountains ever since, shunning civilized society. And when he learned that Thomas Carter owed money to Mr. Crane, he saw an opportunity." Finch paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. He came down from his mountain and offered to pay Carter's debt. But his offer came with a price. The girl. Miss Ayanna Ramirez Carter, a young woman of mixed blood who had no power to refuse. He forced her into a sham marriage to satisfy his own twisted desires, then dragged her back into the wilderness where no one could hear her cries for help. Murmurs ran through the courtroom. Ayanna felt eyes on her, judging, evaluating, deciding who she was before she even spoke. "We will prove," Finch continued, "that this marriage was not entered into freely, that Miss Ramirez was coerced, threatened, and taken against her will, and we will ask you, as men of conscience, to free her from this illegal bondage and return her to the protection of civilized society. Thank you." He sat down. Crane leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Both men smiled. Judge Maxwell turned to Hayes. "Your opening statement, Sheriff." Hayes stood. He was not as smooth as Finch, not as polished, but his voice carried the weight of truth. "Gentlemen," he said, "Mr. Finch just told you a story. Now let me tell you what actually happened. Ayanna Ramirez Carter is the daughter of Diego Ramirez, a man many of you knew. A good man, a fair man, a man who died under suspicious circumstances 3 years ago after testifying against Silas Crane." Crane's face darkened, but he did not move. "When Diego died," Hayes continued, "his daughter went to live with her stepfather, Thomas Carter. And Thomas Carter gambled. He gambled badly. He ran up debts he could not pay. And when Silas Crane came to collect, he offered Carter a choice: the ranch or the girl." The courtroom stirred. "That's when Matthias Brennan stepped in," Hayes said. "Not to kidnap Miss Ramirez, but to save her. He paid Carter's debt in full with his own money. He offered Miss Ramirez his name and his protection, freely given, and she accepted because the alternative was being forced into Silas Crane's house, where we will prove that other women have suffered and died." Hayes looked directly at the jury. "This is not a kidnapping trial. This is a trial about whether a woman has the right to choose who she marries, whether she has the right to say no to one man and yes to another. I believe she does, and I believe the evidence will prove it. Thank you. He sat down. The room was silent for a long moment. Judge Maxwell cleared his throat. Mr. Finch, call your first witness. Finch stood. The prosecution calls Thomas Carter. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Thomas Carter walked in, his hat in his hands, his eyes on the floor. He looked smaller than Ayanna remembered, older. His hand shook as he took the stand and was sworn in. Finch approached him gently, like a doctor approaching a wounded animal. Mr. Carter, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant, Matthias Brennan. Thomas cleared his throat. I didn't know him before he came to town. He just showed up one day saying he'd pay my debts. And what did he want in return? Thomas finally looked up. His eyes found Ayanna across the courtroom. What she saw there was not cruelty. It was shame. Deep, terrible shame. He wanted my daughter, Thomas said quietly. He said he'd pay everything if I agreed to let him marry her. And did Miss Ramirez want to marry him? Thomas opened his mouth, closed it. Ayanna could see the war happening inside him. Tell the truth and lose Crane's money. Tell the lie and lose his soul. She watched her father, this weak man who had failed her over and over, and waited to see what choice he would make this time. Thomas Carter sat in the witness chair, his hands gripping his hat so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for him to answer the question that would decide everything. Mr. Carter, Finch pressed, his voice soft but insistent, did your daughter want to marry Matthias Brennan? Thomas's mouth worked. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the autumn chills seeping through the courthouse walls. His eyes darted to Ayanna, then to Crane, then back to his lap. She said no at first, he finally whispered. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Finch smiled like a cat with cream. She said no, Finch repeated, turning to make sure the jury heard. And what did Mr. Brennan do when she refused? Objection, Hayes called out, standing quickly. Leading the witness. Judge Maxwell waved a hand dismissively. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Carter. Thomas looked at Ayanna again. For a long moment their eyes locked. She saw everything in that gaze. Every poker game lost. Every bottle emptied. Every promise broken. Every time he had chosen the easy path instead of the right one. She did not look away. She held his stare and let him see what his choices had cost. Brennan didn't do nothing when she said no, Thomas said, his voice gaining unexpected strength. He told me it had to be her choice, said he wouldn't force her into anything. Finch's smile faltered. But she married him anyway, didn't she? Yeah, she did. After you told her what would happen if she didn't, after you made it clear the family would lose everything. I told her we'd lose the ranch, Thomas admitted. That's true. So she had no real choice at all, did she? It was marry Brennan or watch her family starve. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something no one expected. She had more choice with Brennan than she would have had with Crane. The courtroom erupted. Finch spun around. Judge Maxwell banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in this court! When the noise died down, Finch approached Thomas with narrowed eyes. What do you mean by that, Mr. Carter? I mean, Crane told me if I didn't give him Ayanna, he'd take the ranch and put Rose and me out with nothing. Said Ayanna would work in his house. We both knew what that meant. Objection, Finch shouted. Speculation and hearsay. It ain't speculation when a man threatens you to your face, Thomas shot back, and for the first time in years, Ayanna heard something like backbone in her father's voice. Crane wanted her, and he didn't care what she wanted. At least Brennan gave her a choice. Finch's face had gone red. He glanced at Crane, who sat rigid as stone, his pale eyes burning with fury. No further questions, Finch said tightly. Hayes stood for cross-examination. Mr. Carter, in all the time since the wedding, have you seen any evidence that your daughter was harmed by Mr. Brennan? No, sir. Has she written to her sister? Yes, sir. 3 letters. Rose read them to me. Ayanna said she was safe, said she was learning things, said Brennan was teaching her to track and she was teaching him to read better. That doesn't sound like a kidnapping to you, does it? No, sir. It sounds like a marriage. Hayes nodded. Thank you, Mr. Carter. That took courage. Thomas stepped down from the witness stand. As he walked past Crane, the older man's expression promised retribution. Thomas saw it and flinched, but he kept walking. He took a seat in the back of the courtroom, his hat still clutched in his shaking hands. Finch called 2 more witnesses. A ranch hand who claimed he had seen Ayanna crying the day before the wedding. A shopkeeper who swore she looked terrified in the church. But under Hayes's cross-examination, both admitted they had not actually spoken to Ayanna. They had only watched from a distance and assumed. Assumptions are not evidence, Hayes told the jury. Fear is not proof of force. Every bride is nervous on her wedding day. That's human nature. By the time the lunch recess was called, the morning had gone better than Ayanna had dared hope. Thomas's testimony had not destroyed them. It had actually helped. They ate in Hayes's office, cold chicken and bread that no one wanted. Matthias stood by the window watching the street. "Crane's furious," he said. "Look at him." Ayanna came to the window. Across the street, Crane stood outside his saloon, surrounded by his men. He was speaking rapidly, his face twisted with anger. One of his hired guns gestured toward the courthouse. Another checked his gun. "They're planning something," Nietzsche said from the corner where he sat cross-legged on the floor. He had been allowed inside during recess, though he would have to leave when court resumed. "Snake does not accept defeat. He will strike." "Not here," Hayes said. "Too many witnesses, too many people watching. But on the road back to the cabin, in the dark." He trailed off, the implication clear. "Then we'll be ready," Matthias said. The afternoon session began with Dr. Helena Wright taking the stand. She was a tall woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, dressed in a plain brown dress. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent 30 years being doubted and had stopped caring. Finch tried to undermine her immediately. "Dr. Wright, you claim to be a physician, but you're a woman. How can the jury trust your medical opinion?" Helena looked at him like he was a particularly dim child. "I graduated from Philadelphia Medical College in 1848. I studied under Dr. Ann Preston. I have delivered over 300 babies, set 200 broken bones, and saved more lives than I can count. My being a woman does not make my eyes less sharp or my knowledge less true." Several men in the jury box nodded appreciatively. Hayes stood. "Dr. Wright, have you examined Miss Ayanna since her marriage?" "I have. 3 days after the wedding, Sheriff Hayes asked me to conduct a medical examination." "And what did you find?" "No signs of physical harm, no bruises, no injuries, no evidence of mistreatment of any kind." She pulled a folder from her bag. "I documented everything in my medical notes." "Have you examined other women in this territory?" "I have." "Have you ever examined women who worked at Silas Crane's ranch?" Finch jumped to his feet. "Objection. Irrelevant." "Goes to character and pattern, Your Honor," Hayes countered. Judge Maxwell hesitated. His eyes flicked to Crane, then back to Hayes. "I'll allow it. But be brief." Helena opened her folder. "I have examined 3 women who worked at Mr. Crane's ranch over the past 5 years. All 3 showed signs of physical abuse, bruises in various stages of healing. 2 had broken ribs that had healed improperly. 1 had burn marks consistent with cigar burns." The courtroom gasped. Several women in the gallery covered their mouths. "Did any of these women report who had hurt them?" Hayes asked. "One tried to. She died 3 days later. They said it was suicide." Helena's voice was hard as iron. "I examined her body. The rope marks on her neck were consistent with murder, not self-hanging. Someone killed her and made it look like suicide." "Objection!" Finch was shouting now. "This is outrageous speculation. There's no proof." "I have the medical records right here," Helena said, holding up papers. I documented everything. The angle of the bruising, the defensive wounds on her hands. She fought her killer. Judge Maxwell was sweating now. Dr. Wright, these are serious accusations. They're serious truths, Your Honor, and this jury deserves to know them before they decide whether to send Miss Ayanna into the custody of a man with a history of violence against women. The afternoon dissolved into chaos. Finch demanded the testimony be stricken. Hayes argued it showed clear motive for why Ayanna would choose any marriage over working for Crane. Judge Maxwell called multiple recesses, clearly torn between his debt to Crane and the undeniable weight of medical evidence. When court finally adjourned for the day, the jury looked shaken. Several had been taking notes during Helena's testimony. One had been openly weeping. Outside, the crowd had grown. Word of Helena's testimony had spread through town like wildfire. People pressed close, trying to hear more, trying to see the Apache bride who had caused such turmoil. Nietzsche materialized beside them as they walked back to Hayes's house. "Crane's men are watching," he said quietly. "6 of them. They shadow you." "Let them watch," Matthias said. "We're not hiding." That night, they gathered around Hayes's small table to plan the next day. Ayanna would testify in the morning. Everything rested on whether the jury would believe her. "Tell the truth," Hayes coached. "Don't embellish. Don't get angry, even if Finch tries to provoke you. Be yourself. Let them see you're intelligent, capable, and making your own choices." "What if they don't believe me?" Ayanna asked. "Then we appeal. We take this to the Territorial Supreme Court if we have to." But Hayes's eyes said what his mouth would not. An appeal would take months. Months when Ayanna would be held in custody. Months when Crane could work his influence. Matthias reached across the table and took her hand. "They'll believe you, because you're telling the truth, and truth has power." Later, when the others had gone to sleep, Ayanna sat by the window watching the dark street. Matthias came to sit beside her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too many thoughts." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Matthias spoke. "I want to tell you something. About the night Samuel died." Ayanna turned to look at him. "I wasn't there when it happened," he said. "I was checking trap lines up north. By the time I got back to Diego's ranch, Samuel had been dead for 2 days. They'd already buried him." His voice was rough with old pain. "Diego told me what happened, how Crane's men came in the night, how they dragged Samuel out of the house, how they hung him from an oak tree while Kaya screamed." He paused. "Diego tried to stop them. They beat him unconscious. When he woke up, Samuel was dead and Kaya was in labor, bleeding out. Diego saved me instead of getting help for himself," Ayanna said softly. "His head injuries never fully healed. That's what eventually killed him." "He was a better man than I'll ever be," Matthias said. "I went hunting for Crane's men, found 3 of them in a saloon in Durango. I walked in with a gun in each hand and I killed them all." "Were they the ones who killed Samuel?" "2 of them were. The 3rd was just drunk and stupid and tried to draw on me." He looked at his hands. "I don't regret killing the 2 who hung my brother. But that 3rd man, he haunts me. He died because he was in the wrong place with the wrong people. That's when I realized revenge doesn't bring peace. It just adds more ghosts." "Is that why you chose to save me instead of killing Crane?" "Part of it. But mostly I chose you because you deserved better than being another of Crane's victims. You deserved a chance to choose your own path." Ayanna squeezed his hand. "Thank you. For the choice. For seeing me as a person instead of a problem." "You're not a problem. You're family." He smiled slightly. "And you're pretty good at teaching reading for someone I barely know." She laughed quietly. "You're not a bad student for a mountain hermit." They sat together in the darkness, hand in hand, until exhaustion finally pulled them both toward sleep. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Snow had started falling during the night, small hard flakes that promised winter was coming early. The courthouse was already packed when they arrived, people standing in the aisles, sitting on windowsills, crowding the doorway. Judge Maxwell banged his gavel. "The defense may call its first witness." Hayes stood. "The defense calls Ayanna Ramirez Brennan." Ayanna walked to the stand on legs that felt like water. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. When she sat down, she could feel every eye in the courtroom weighing her, judging her, deciding if she was worth believing. Hayes approached gently. "Please state your full name for the court." "Ayanna Ramirez Brennan." "And how old are you?" 20 years old. "Tell us about your father, your real father, Diego Ramirez." Ayanna took a breath. "Diego Ramirez found me when I was newborn. My mother had died in childbirth. My father, Samuel Brennan, had been murdered 2 days earlier. Diego raised me as his own daughter. He taught me to read and write in both English and Spanish. He taught me that dignity comes from choices, not from blood." "What happened to Diego?" "He died 3 years ago. They said his horse threw him, but I saw the body. There were rope marks on his neck that didn't come from a fall." "Who do you believe killed him?" "Objection." Finch was on his feet. "Speculation." "I'll rephrase," Hayes said. "Did Diego have any enemies?" "One. Silas Crane. Diego testified against Mr. Crane in a land dispute. 2 weeks later, Diego was dead." Murmurs ran through the courtroom. Crane's face had gone white with rage. Hayes continued, "Tell us about the night your stepfather told you about the debt." Ayanna told the story exactly as it had happened. Thomas drunk and desperate. Crane's demand for payment. The choice between the ranch and herself. "What did you think when you heard Mr. Crane wanted you to work in his house?" "I knew what it meant. Everyone knew. Women who went to work at Crane's ranch came back broken, or didn't come back at all." "So what did you do?" "I said no. I told my stepfather I would never go willingly into that house." "And then Matthias Brennan appeared?" "Yes. Sheriff Hayes brought him. Matthias offered to pay the debt and marry me." "Did he force you?" "No." Ayanna looked directly at the jury. "He told me I was free to leave whenever I wanted. He gave me a gun and taught me to use it. He slept in the loft while I took the bed. He treated me with more respect than most men in this territory have ever shown me." "Why did you marry him?" "Because he gave me a choice. Crane would have taken me by force. Thomas would have sold me to save himself, but Matthias offered me partnership, protection, freedom. How could I say no to that?" Hayes nodded. "Your witness." Finch approached like a circling wolf. "Miss Ramirez, you expect this jury to believe you willingly married a man you'd never met? A man with a reputation as a killer?" "I married a man who was honest with me. Yes, he killed 3 men, but 2 of those men murdered his brother. He defended himself against the 3rd. That's not the same as being a murderer." "You're half Apache, correct?" The question hung in the air like poison. Ayanna felt the temperature in the room change. "My mother was Apache. My father was white." "Yes." "And you know that in this territory your kind has limited rights. You couldn't refuse Mr. Crane even if you wanted to." "My kind?" Ayanna's voice went cold as winter ice. "I'm a human being, same as you, same as everyone in this room. The fact that you don't see that is your failure, not mine." Several people in the gallery gasped. One man in the jury box actually smiled. Finch's face flushed. "You're being disrespectful." "No, I'm being honest. You asked me about my heritage like it's something shameful. My mother was a skilled healer and hunter. My father was a brave man who loved across the boundaries of race. I'm proud of where I come from. The question is why that makes you so uncomfortable." "Your Honor," Finch appealed to the judge. But Judge Maxwell looked uncertain. He glanced at the jury and saw their faces. They were not disgusted by Ayanna. They were impressed. "Answer the questions, Miss Brennan," the judge said weakly. Finch tried a different approach. "Isn't it true that you were afraid of Mr. Brennan?" "At first, yes, I didn't know him." "So you were afraid when you married him?" "I was uncertain. There's a difference." "But you said yes under duress." "I said yes under pressure." But Matthias Brennan wasn't the one pressuring me. Circumstance was, the debt was, Crane's threat was. She leaned forward. If I'm guilty of anything, it's choosing the lesser of two difficult options. But that's still a choice. That's still my decision. Finch spent another 30 minutes trying to trip her up, but Ayanna remained calm and clear. Every attack he made, she deflected with truth and dignity. Finally, frustrated and angry, Finch dismissed her. As Ayanna stepped down from the stand, she walked past Crane. He was staring at her with pure hatred, but underneath the hatred she saw something else. Fear. He was afraid she was going to win. Hayes called Reverend Webb next. The old minister was shaking as he took the stand, his eyes darting to Crane repeatedly. "Reverend Webb," Hayes said gently, "you performed the marriage ceremony between Ayanna and Matthias. Did Miss Ayanna appear to be under duress?" Webb hesitated. She was nervous. "But did she say the words willingly?" Another pause. Crane was staring at him, and everyone could see it. The Reverend's hands were trembling. "Reverend," Hayes pressed, "did she or did she not speak her vows clearly?" Webb's voice came out as a whisper. "She did." "And at any point did she try to run or protest?" "No." "Thank you, Reverend." Finch waved off cross-examination. Webb practically fled from the stand. Hayes called two more witnesses. A Mexican woman who had known Diego and swore he had loved Ayanna like his own blood. A shopkeeper who testified that Ayanna had come into town twice since the wedding, always with Matthias, and had never seemed afraid or coerced. By the time the afternoon light began to fade, both sides had finished presenting evidence. Judge Maxwell addressed the jury. "Gentlemen, you've heard the testimony. Tomorrow morning you will deliberate and reach a verdict. Court is adjourned until 9 o'clock." The gavel fell. People began filing out of the courtroom, their voices rising in argument and debate. Some thought Ayanna had proven her case. Others thought a half-breed had no right to choose anything. As Matthias and Ayanna stood to leave, Crane approached. His hired guns flanked him, hands resting near their weapons. "Enjoy your evening," Crane said softly. "It may be your last one together." "Is that a threat?" Matthias asked. "It's a promise. One way or another, that girl will be mine. The jury will rule in my favor, or accidents will happen. People die on mountain roads all the time." "Touch her, and I'll kill you," Matthias said quietly. "No, you won't. Because you're not that man anymore. You've gone soft. You think laws and courts will save you." Crane smiled. "But laws are just words, and words don't stop bullets." He turned and walked away, his men following like wolves behind a pack leader. Nietzsche appeared beside them. "He will attack tonight, before verdict. He knows he is losing." "Then we'll be ready," Matthias said. They walked back to Hayes's house through streets that had gone quiet and watchful. Snow was falling harder now, covering the ground in white. By morning the world would be clean and cold. But first they had to survive the night. They did not sleep that night. Matthias kept watch by the front window while Nietzsche watched the back. Hayes checked and rechecked his rifle, his hands steady despite the tension that filled the small house like smoke. Ayanna sat at the table, unable to rest. She had done all she could, spoken her truth, shown the jury she was a person, not property. Now the decision rested in the hands of 12 men she did not know. Around midnight they heard horses. Matthias signaled for silence. Through the window he could see 4 riders moving slowly down the street, checking buildings, looking for something. Crane's men. They passed Hayes's house without stopping, but the message was clear. They were watching, waiting. "They won't try anything tonight," Hayes said quietly. "Too many witnesses, too much attention on the trial. But after the verdict, on the road home, that's when they'll strike." "Then we don't take the road," Nietzsche said. "We go through the back country, places horses cannot follow easily." "If we run, Crane wins," Ayanna said. "Everyone will say we were guilty and fled. If we die, Crane also wins, Matthias countered. They debated through the dark hours, weighing options, making plans. By the time dawn came gray and cold through the windows, they had decided. They would hear the verdict. They would stand and face whatever came. But they would be ready to fight if fighting became necessary. The courthouse was even more crowded than before. People had come from 3 counties away to witness the conclusion. They packed the benches, lined the walls, crowded into every available space. The air was thick with body heat and anticipation. Judge Maxwell took his seat at exactly 9 o'clock. He looked tired, like a man who had not slept well. His eyes avoided both Crane and Matthias. "Bring in the jury," he said. The 12 men filed in and took their seats. Their faces revealed nothing. Some looked at Ayanna, some looked at the floor. None looked at Crane. "Gentlemen of the jury," Judge Maxwell said, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. He was a rancher named Bill Morrison, a man of perhaps 50 with weathered skin and calloused hands. He held a piece of paper that trembled slightly. "We have, Your Honor." "In the matter of the territory versus Matthias Brennan, how do you find?" Morrison looked directly at Ayanna. For a long moment their eyes held. Then he turned to the judge. "We find the defendant not guilty of all charges." The courtroom exploded. Half the crowd cheered. The other half shouted in protest. Judge Maxwell banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Ayanna felt Matthias's hand find hers under the table. She squeezed it hard, hardly daring to believe what she had heard. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, his voice rising over the noise, "the jury wishes to state for the record that we find the marriage between Matthias Brennan and Ayanna Ramirez to be legal and entered into with consent of both parties. We recommend no further action be taken against either party." Judge Maxwell's face had gone pale. He looked at Crane, who sat frozen in his chair, his knuckles white on his silver cane. "The jury has spoken," the judge said reluctantly. "The defendant is free to go. This court is adjourned." The gavel fell one final time. People surged forward. Some wanted to congratulate them. Others wanted to argue. Dr. Helena Wright pushed through the crowd and embraced Ayanna. "You were magnificent," she said. "Absolutely magnificent." Reverend Webb appeared, tears in his eyes. "Forgive me for my weakness," he said to Ayanna. "I should have spoken stronger for you." "You spoke the truth," Ayanna replied. That took courage. They made their way through the crowd toward the door. Outside, snow was falling steadily, already covering the street in white. Nietzsche stood beside his horse, his bow in hand, watching everything. Crane appeared on the courthouse steps above them. His face was a mask of fury barely contained. "This isn't over," he called down. "The jury may have been fooled, but I know the truth. You're a kidnapper, Brennan, and you're a whore, girl. Everyone will see it eventually." Several men in the crowd gasped at the language. Morrison, the jury foreman, turned red with anger. "Mr. Crane," he said loudly, "we 12 men heard all the evidence. We saw Miss Ayanna testify. We saw her dignity and her truth. The only person who's been lying here is you." "How dare you?" Crane spat. "I own half your debt, Morrison." "Then come collect it. But that don't change facts. You tried to buy a woman like she was cattle. The jury said no. The law said no. Now accept it and move on." Other voices joined Morrison's. Men who had been quiet now spoke up. Women who had feared Crane found their voices. "My sister worked at your ranch," one woman shouted. "She came home with bruises." "You foreclosed on my family's farm for being one day late on payment," a young man called out. The crowd's mood was shifting. Years of resentment against Crane's control, his cruelty, his iron grip on the town, all of it came pouring out. Crane saw it happening, saw his power slipping away like water through his fingers. His face went from red to white to purple. "You'll all regret this," he said. "Every single one of you." He turned and pushed through the crowd toward his saloon, his hired guns following. But even his men looked uncertain now. The jury's verdict had not just freed Matthias and Ayanna. It had broken something in the town's fear of Silas Crane. Hayes touched Matthias's shoulder. "You need to leave. Now. While people are still here watching. Crane won't try anything in broad daylight with this many witnesses, but once you're on the trail, all bets are off." "We're ready," Matthias said. They collected their horses from the livery. The stableman, an old Mexican man named Carlos, refused payment. "Diego was good man," he said to Ayana. "You are good woman. Go with God." They rode out of Durango just after noon, with snow falling thick around them. Matthias and Ayana on horseback, Nietzsche ranging ahead as scout. The trail wound up into the foothills, following a creek that was already starting to ice over at the edges. They had been riding for perhaps 2 hours when Nietzsche suddenly appeared beside them. "6 riders," he said, "coming fast from the south, Crane's men." Matthias looked back. He could see them now, dark shapes moving through the falling snow. They were perhaps a mile behind, but closing fast. "How far to the cabin?" Ayana asked. 4 hours at this pace, Matthias said. 2 hours if we push the horses hard. But they can't sustain that in this snow. "Then we don't run," Nietzsche said. "We make them come to us. Choose our ground." They pushed the horses into a faster trot, angling toward a narrow canyon Nietzsche knew. The walls were steep and rocky, with good cover. It was a place where 6 men could be held off by 3 if those 3 were smart and brave. They reached the canyon just as the riders came into view behind them. Matthias helped Ayana dismount and sent the horses further into the canyon where they would be safe. "You know how to shoot?" he asked her. She pulled her pistol and checked the chamber with practiced efficiency. "Diego taught me." "Then find cover and stay low. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target." Nietzsche was already moving up the canyon wall like a shadow, his bow in hand. He found a position 20 feet up, hidden behind rocks, with a clear field of fire. Matthias took a position behind a large boulder at the canyon entrance. Ayana found a spot 10 feet to his right, sheltered by fallen rocks. They waited. The 6 riders appeared at the canyon mouth. They were led by Virgil Cobb, Crane's head enforcer, a hard man with cold eyes and quick hands. The others were hired guns, men who killed for money and asked no questions. "Brennan," Virgil called out, "Mr. Crane wants to talk. Come out peaceful and nobody gets hurt." "Crane can come talk himself if he wants," Matthias called back. "Can't do that. Mr. Crane sent us to collect the girl. Says she's still owed to him. Jury verdict be damned." "The law says different." "The law's a long way from here, Brennan. Out here might makes right. And we got 6 guns to your 1. "You counted wrong," Matthias said. An arrow whispered through the falling snow. It struck the ground between the front horse's legs, making the animal rear and whinny. The men wheeled their horses looking for the shooter, but Nietzsche was invisible among the rocks. "Apache," one of the men said nervously. "Just 1, Virgil said. "We still got numbers. Spread out. Brennan's up in those rocks. Find him and the girl." The 6 men dismounted and began to advance into the canyon, spreading out to make themselves harder targets. They moved with the confidence of men who had done this before. Matthias waited until they were 20 yards into the canyon. Then he called out one more time. "Last chance to turn back. Nobody has to die today." "You killed 3 of Crane's men 20 years ago," Virgil called back. "Today we settle that debt. Those men murdered my brother. I'd do it again." "Then I guess we're past talking." Virgil drew his gun. His men did the same. The canyon erupted into violence. Matthias's first shot took the hat off one gunman, deliberate warning shot. Nietzsche's arrow caught another man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man screamed and dropped his gun. Ayana aimed carefully and fired. Her bullet struck the gun out of a third man's hand. He yelped and stumbled backward. "They're not shooting to kill," one man shouted. "They're trying to scare us." "Then let's show them what real shooting looks like," Virgil snarled. He fired 3 rapid shots at Matthias's position. Rock chips exploded where the bullets struck. Matthias ducked low. The battle became chaos. Guns roared. Bullets whined off stone. Snow swirled in the wind, making it hard to see. The echoes in the canyon made it impossible to tell where shots were coming from. Matthias fired again, this time hitting a man in the leg. Not fatal, but enough to take him out of the fight. The man went down cursing. Nietzsche moved like smoke through the rocks, appearing and disappearing, each arrow finding its target. Another shoulder wound, another man clutching his leg. But Virgil and his remaining men were pressing forward, using the snow and rocks for cover, firing methodically. They were skilled fighters, and they were not intimidated. One got close enough to Ayana's position that she could see his face. He raised his gun, aiming directly at her. She fired first. Her bullet caught him in the chest. He looked down at the spreading red stain with surprise, then crumpled to the ground. Ayana stared at what she had done. Her first kill. Her hands shook. "Ayana!" Matthias's voice cut through her shock. "Move, now!" She scrambled to new cover just as bullets tore through the space where she had been. Two of Virgil's men were advancing on her position, having seen her muzzle flash. Matthias stepped out from behind his boulder and fired twice in rapid succession. Both men went down, one clutching his arm, the other his side, wounded but alive. That left only Virgil and one other man. "Fall back!" the last gunman shouted. He had seen enough. 4 men down, 1 dead, himself and Virgil against 3 unseen enemies in a killing box. This was not the easy job Crane had promised. But Virgil was not retreating. His face was set with determination that bordered on madness. "No! Crane wants them dead. All of them!" "Crane can go to hell," the other man said. He turned and ran back toward the horses. Virgil watched him go, then turned back to the canyon. He had lost control of his men, lost the fight. But he could still complete the mission. He could still kill Brennan. He charged forward, firing both his pistols, bullets spraying wildly. It was the desperate move of a man with nothing left to lose. Matthias stepped fully into the open. He aimed carefully, accounting for wind and snow and Virgil's erratic movement. He fired once. The bullet took Virgil in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping both his guns. Virgil collapsed into the snow, clutching his wound. Matthias walked forward slowly, his gun trained on the fallen man. Ayana emerged from cover. Nietzsche climbed down from the rocks. They stood over Virgil Cobb, who lay bleeding in the white snow that was already turning red around him. "Finish it," Virgil gasped. "You killed 3 men before. What's one more?" Matthias looked down at him for a long moment. "I was younger then, angrier, filled with grief that had nowhere to go but out." He lowered his gun. "But I'm done adding ghosts to my collection. You'll live. Tell Crane that if he wants us, he'll have to come himself. Tell him the killing stops. Tell him we're through running." He turned to Nietzsche. "Help me tie their wounds. We're not leaving them to freeze." They worked quickly, binding wounds with torn cloth, making sure the injured men would not bleed out. The one Ayana had killed lay still in the snow. They covered his face with his own coat. The man who had run came back slowly, leading the horses. His gun was holstered. "You letting us go?" he asked in disbelief. "We're letting you live," Matthias said. "There's a difference. Get your wounded and get out of here. Tell Crane this is over." The man nodded slowly. "You could have killed us all." "Yes," Matthias said, "but we chose not to. Remember that. Remember mercy is stronger than revenge." They helped load the wounded men onto horses. Virgil could barely stay in the saddle, but he was alive. The man Ayana had killed was tied across his horse, wrapped in blankets. As the defeated gunmen rode away, Ayana stood in the bloody snow, looking at her hands. "I killed him," she said quietly. "That man. I killed him." Matthias came to stand beside her. "You defended yourself. He would have killed you." "It doesn't make it easier." "No, it never does." He put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "But you did what you had to do. That takes courage." Nietzsche joined them. "We should not stay here. More may come." They retrieved their horses and continued up the trail. The snow was falling harder now, covering their tracks, erasing the evidence of the battle. By the time they reached the cabin, full dark had fallen, and the world was white and silent. Inside, Matthias built up the fire while Ayanna sat staring at nothing. The shock of the day, the trial and the verdict and the gunfight, all of it crashed over her at once. Her hands would not stop shaking. Nietzsche made her tea from herbs he carried, bitter but calming. "First kill is always hard," he said gently, "but you protected your life. That is not wrong." "I keep seeing his face," she whispered, "the surprise in his eyes." "You will see it for a while," Nietzsche said, "but time softens sharp memories, and you will learn to live with what you did because you must. That is the warrior's burden." Matthias knelt beside her chair. "Ayanna, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "You are not a killer. You are a survivor. That man made his choice when he drew his gun. You made yours when you protected yourself. Don't let guilt for his choice destroy you." "How did you do it?" she asked. "After you killed those men in the saloon, how did you go on?" "I didn't. Not well. That's why I ran to the mountains. I let guilt and grief drive me into isolation." He took her hands in his. "But you're stronger than I was. You have people who love you. You have a future worth fighting for. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let this break you." She nodded slowly. "Will Crane send more men?" "Maybe. Probably. But we'll be ready." That night they took turns keeping watch. The snow continued to fall, piling up against the cabin walls, muffling sound. The world outside became a white void where anything could be hiding. But nothing came. No riders, no attacks, just the wind and the snow and the cold. By morning, 2 feet of snow covered the ground. The trail down to Durango was impassable. They were trapped in the cabin until the weather cleared. Trapped, but safe. Trapped, but together. Trapped, but finally, legally, undeniably free. Ayanna stood at the window, watching snow fall in the gray dawn light. Matthias came to stand beside her. "The jury believed me," she said softly, as if she still could not quite accept it. 12 men looked at you and saw a person worth respecting. That's something. Do you think it's really over? Or will Crane keep coming? I don't know. But I know this. You stood in that courtroom and spoke your truth. You stood in that canyon and defended yourself. You're not a victim anymore, Ayanna. You're a warrior. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long time, watching the snow transform the world into something clean and new. Behind them, Nietzsche sat by the fire, working on a new bow. He smiled to himself, watching the young people who did not yet know they were in love. Outside, miles away in Durango, Silas Crane received the news of his men's defeat. He sat in his office above the saloon, the telegram crumpled in his fist, and he made a decision. If hired guns could not finish this, he would do it himself. But not yet. Not while the snow trapped everyone in place. He would wait for spring. He would wait for the right moment. And then he would make Matthias Brennan and his Apache bride pay for every humiliation they had caused him. Patience, he told himself. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and winter in Colorado was very, very cold. The snow trapped them for 3 weeks. 3 weeks where the world outside the cabin became an impassable white wilderness. 3 weeks where they learned to live not as strangers bound by legal paper, but as family bound by choice. Matthias taught Ayanna how to maintain traps in deep snow, how to read animal tracks in fresh powder, how to find food when the land seemed dead and frozen. She taught him more Apache words, showed him healing herbs her mother had taught her, read to him from books by lamplight. Nietzsche stayed with them, sleeping in the loft, telling stories of the old ways. He taught them both how to move silently through snow, how to set ambushes, how to survive when the world turned hostile. But mostly he watched them grow closer, watched the careful distance between them slowly disappear. On the 14th night, as wind howled around the cabin and the fire burned low, Matthias and Ayanna sat together on the floor, backs against the bed frame, shoulders touching. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. coming down from your mountain, getting tangled up in all this." He was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that you had to kill a man. I regret that you're in danger because of me." "That's not what I asked." He turned to look at her. In the firelight, her face was all shadows and soft edges. "No, I don't regret it. These past weeks, learning to know you, seeing your strength, it's the first time in 5 years I've felt alive instead of just surviving." "I feel the same," she said. "I know this started as necessity, protection from Crane, obligation to Diego, but it's become something else." "What has it become?" She met his eyes. "Home." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he cupped her face gently in his rough hand. "May I kiss you? Really kiss you, not like in the church." "Yes." He leaned in carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. Their lips met soft and searching, a question and an answer. She made a small sound in her throat, and her hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palm. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "That was worth waiting for," he said. She laughed, a sound of pure joy. "It was." From the loft, Nietzsche's voice drifted down. "About time. I was beginning to think you both were blind." They looked up to see him peering down at them, grinning. "You were awake?" Ayanna asked, mortified. "Old warriors sleep light, and old warriors know when two people are dancing around each other like nervous deer." He settled back into his blankets. "Now maybe you both can stop pretending and start living." The snow finally melted in early December. The trail down to Durango became passable again, though still treacherous with mud and ice. Nietzsche rode down first to scout, to see what had changed in their absence. He returned 2 days later with news. Crane is still there, but he is quiet, watching, waiting. Nietzsche dismounted and accepted the coffee Ayanna handed him. The town talks of nothing but the trial. Many people angry at Crane now. Dr. Wright treating 3 more women who worked at his ranch, all with injuries. "Is he being charged?" Matthias asked. "No, the women afraid to testify, but people know. They see." Nietzsche looked at them both seriously. "Also, your father sent message. Thomas Carter. He wants to see you." Ayanna's face hardened. "I have nothing to say to him. He says he is dying." The world seemed to stop. "What?" Ayanna whispered. "Liver, the drinking. Doctor says maybe 2 months." Nietzsche's expression was sympathetic. "He wants to ask forgiveness before he dies." Ayanna stood and walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. Matthias came to stand behind her. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. "I know. But if I don't, I'll always wonder. I'll always carry the anger." She turned to face him. "Will you come with me? Anywhere you need to go." They rode down to Durango the next morning. The town looked different in winter, smaller somehow, less threatening. People watched them pass, but with different eyes now. Some nodded respectfully. A few even called out greetings. At the Carter house, Rose opened the door. She looked older than her 16 years, worn down by caring for a dying father. "He's in bed," she said. "Sleeping most of the time now. But he's been asking for you every day." "How are you managing?" Ayanna asked. "Dr. Wright helps, and some of the church women bring food." Rose looked at Matthias. "Thank you for taking care of my sister." "She takes care of herself," he replied. "I just stand beside her." Thomas Carter lay in the small bedroom, so thin he barely made a shape under the blankets. His skin was yellow, his breathing shallow. When Ayanna entered, his eyes opened. "You came," he rasped. "I came." She sat in the chair beside the bed. Matthias stood in the doorway, giving them space, but staying close. "I'm sorry," Thomas said. The words came out broken, painful. "For everything. For the drinking. For the debts. For selling you like you were nothing. You did sell me. Twice. I know. I know. And it's eating me alive. He coughed, a wet, terrible sound. But I need you to know something. When I testified in court, when I told the truth instead of the lie Crane paid me for, that was the first brave thing I did in 20 years. It was also the least you could do. You're right. You're absolutely right. He reached out a trembling hand. She did not take it. Your mother, your real mother, Kaya, she was braver in one day than I've been in my whole life. Diego, too. They stood up for what was right even when it cost them everything. I never had that courage. Why did you hate me? Ayanna asked, the question that had haunted her for years finally given voice. I was a child. I did nothing to you. But you treated me like a burden. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Because every time I looked at you, I saw everything I wasn't. You had Diego's strength, Kaya's dignity. You were good, despite everything, and I was weak despite having every advantage. He sobbed, a broken sound. I hated you because you were a living reminder of my own failures. That's a terrible reason to hate a child. I know. God help me, I know. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Thomas spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Rose, when I'm gone, she'll have nothing. The ranch is mortgaged to Crane. She'll be on the street. Rose can come live with us, Ayanna said. The decision was instant, certain. If she wants. She's my sister. She's welcome in my home. Thank you. Thank you. Thomas closed his eyes. I don't deserve your mercy. No, Ayanna agreed. You don't, but I'm not giving it for you. I'm giving it for me. So I don't carry hate in my heart the way you carried it in yours. She stood to leave. At the door, she paused. I forgive you, Thomas. Not because you earned it, but because forgiveness is freedom, and I choose to be free. His sobs followed her down the hallway. Outside, she leaned against Matthias and let herself cry. He held her, saying nothing, just being there. It hurts, she said. Forgiving him hurts. That's how you know it's real, he replied. They were preparing to ride back up to the cabin when Sheriff Hayes found them. Glad I caught you, he said. There's something you need to know. Crane's been quiet, but he's been busy. He sent for hired guns from Denver, professional killers. Word is he's planning something for spring. How many men? Matthias asked. Don't know for sure. Maybe 10. Maybe more. Hayes looked grim. He's not giving up. He's just changing tactics. Then we'll be ready. There's something else. Hayes pulled out a letter. This came from the territorial governor's office. Someone's been writing letters, lots of letters, about Crane, about his business practices, about the women he's hurt. Who? Ayanna asked. Dr. Wright, Reverend Webb, even some of Crane's former employees who finally found courage to speak up. Hayes handed Matthias the letter. The governor's sending an investigator. Crane's going to be audited, his land deals examined, his ranch inspected. Will it be enough to stop him? Maybe, if the investigator's honest, if he can't be bought. Hayes met their eyes. But it'll take time, months probably, and Crane won't wait quietly for justice to find him. That night, back at the cabin, they held a council of war. Matthias, Ayanna, Nietzsche, and Hayes, who had ridden up with them. Crane will strike before the investigator arrives, Nietzsche said. That is his nature. Corner a snake, and it strikes. Then we don't wait for him to come to us, Matthias said. We go to him. We end this. You mean kill him? Hayes asked carefully. No. Matthias looked at Ayanna. We've spilled enough blood. We find another way. What way? Ayanna asked. He won't stop. He'll keep sending men, keep trying to destroy us. Then we destroy his power instead of destroying him. We take away everything he uses to hurt people. His money, his influence, his grip on the town. They talked through the night, forming a plan. It was risky. It required perfect timing and no small amount of luck. But it was the only way forward that did not involve more killing. 3 months passed. Winter gave way to early spring. The snow melted, revealing the brown grass beneath. Crocuses pushed up through the cold earth. The world was waking up, and so was Silas Crane. On a bright April morning, he rode out of Durango with 12 hired guns at his back. They were headed for the cabin in the mountains, headed to finish what the jury verdict had left undone. But the cabin was empty. Matthias and Ayanna were not there. They were in Durango, and they were not alone. The territorial investigator had arrived 2 days early, brought by Sheriff Hayes, who had received advance warning. His name was Judge Samuel Porter, and he was known for being incorruptible. He had spent 3 days reviewing Crane's business records, interviewing witnesses, examining evidence. Now he stood on the courthouse steps with a warrant in his hand. With him stood Matthias, Ayanna, Dr. Helena Wright, Reverend Webb, and 20 townspeople who had finally found their courage. Behind them, Nietzsche sat on his horse, bow across his lap, a silent reminder that this woman was protected. When Crane and his men returned to town and saw the gathering, they pulled up short. "What's this?" Crane demanded. Judge Porter stepped forward. "Silas Crane, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, extortion, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder." "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong." "Your business records tell a different story. So do the testimonies of 14 women who worked at your ranch. So does the evidence of property seized through illegal foreclosure." Porter nodded to Hayes. "Sheriff, do your duty." Hayes stepped forward with handcuffs. Crane's hired guns tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. "Don't," Matthias said quietly. His hand rested near his gun, but he had not drawn. "Your employer's done. Finished. You can ride away right now, or you can go to jail with him for obstruction of justice. Choose." The hired guns looked at each other. They had been paid to kill a mountain man and his wife. They had not been paid enough to fight the law in front of 20 witnesses. One by one, they turned their horses and rode away. Crane watched them go with disbelief. "You're all cowards," he screamed after them. Hayes snapped the handcuffs onto Crane's wrists. "You're under arrest. You have the right to trial, same as everyone else. I want a lawyer. You'll get one. In Denver. That's where you're going." Hayes looked at Judge Porter. "Federal custody?" "Federal custody," Porter confirmed. "The charges are serious enough that territorial court isn't sufficient. He'll be tried in federal court for violations of civil rights, among other things." Crane's face had gone from red to white. Federal charges meant federal prison if convicted. It meant his empire crumbling. It meant the end of everything he had built. He looked at Ayanna with pure hatred. "This is your fault. All of it. You and that murderer you married." "No," Ayanna said calmly. "This is your fault. You hurt people. You destroyed lives. You thought you were above the law because you had money and power. But justice caught up with you eventually. It always does. I'll get out. I'll come back. And when I do—" "When you do," Matthias interrupted. "If you do, you'll find a town that's no longer afraid of you. You'll find people who stood up and spoke truth. You'll find that fear is only powerful as long as people believe in it." Hayes led Crane away toward the jail. The crowd watched in silence. Then slowly, people began to talk, to smile, to feel the weight of years of fear lifting from their shoulders. Dr. Wright approached Ayanna and embraced her. "You did this. You stood up first, and you showed everyone it was possible." "We did this together," Ayanna corrected. "All of us." Reverend Webb cleared his throat. "Miss Ayanna, Mr. Brennan, I owe you both an apology. I should have spoken stronger in court. I let fear silence me." "You spoke the truth when it mattered," Matthias said. "That's what counts." Rose appeared from the crowd and threw her arms around Ayanna. "Father died yesterday morning," she said through tears. "Peaceful. He asked for you at the end. I told him you forgave him. He smiled. I think he finally found some peace." "I'm glad," Ayanna said, and meant it. "Pack your things. You're coming home with us." "Really?" "Really. You're my sister, my family, and family takes care of each other. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they gathered at the cabin. Matthias, Ayanna, Naiche, Rose, and Sheriff Hayes, who had ridden up to share the news. "Crane's on his way to Denver," Hayes reported. "Judge Porter says the evidence is overwhelming. He'll be convicted, probably 20 years in federal prison." "And his ranch?" Matthias asked. "Being seized as proceeds of crime. The territorial government will auction it off. Money will go to his victims." Hayes smiled. "Dr. Wright suggested part of it be turned into a hospital, for everyone. White, Mexican, Apache, everyone." "Diego would have liked that," Ayanna said softly. They ate together, sharing stories and laughter. Rose asked endless questions about life in the mountains. Naiche told tales of the old days, when the land was free and the people roamed without boundaries. Hayes talked about the changes coming to Colorado, the railroad pushing west, new towns springing up. Later, after the others had gone to sleep, Matthias and Ayanna stood outside under a sky brilliant with stars. "It's really over," she said. "This part is. There'll be other challenges, other struggles. Life doesn't stop just because one battle is won." "I know." She turned to face him. "But we'll face them together." He pulled her close. "Yes, together." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. He went completely still. "What?" "About 2 months. I wasn't sure until Dr. Wright examined me this morning. We're going to have a baby." Wonder filled his voice. "A child. Are you happy?" He laughed, a sound of pure joy. Happy doesn't cover it. Terrified, amazed, grateful, all of those. But yes, happy. "If it's a boy, I want to name him Samuel, after your brother. My father." His arms tightened around her. "And if it's a girl?" "Kaya, after my mother." They would be honored, both of them. They stood together under the stars, holding each other, thinking about the future they were building. A future neither of them had imagined 6 months ago when they had stood in a small church, strangers bound by necessity. Now they were bound by choice, by love, by the life growing inside her that represented hope and healing and the continuation of legacies that had almost been destroyed. 6 months later, as autumn painted the aspens gold once again, their daughter was born. They named her Kaya Margaret Brennan, honoring both her grandmothers. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, and she was perfect. Naiche carved her a cradle from aspen wood and sang her Apache lullabies. Rose doted on her niece, learning to care for a baby so she would be ready when she had children of her own someday. Dr. Wright visited often, checking on both mother and child, marveling at how healthy they both were. The cabin was expanded, more rooms added, a workshop for Matthias, a clinic room where Ayanna could practice the healing arts Naiche was teaching her, space for Rose, space for the future. Word spread through the territory about the Apache woman and the mountain man who had stood up to Silas Crane and won. Other people started coming to them, women fleeing bad situations, men with nowhere else to turn. They offered shelter, guidance, and most importantly, proof that standing up to injustice was possible. A small community grew around the cabin. A few families at first, then more, Apache and white, Mexican and mixed blood, all living together, all looking out for each other. Sheriff Hayes came to visit one spring morning 2 years after Crane's arrest. He brought news. "Crane died in prison last month. Fever. They said he went quick." Ayanna felt nothing at the news. Not joy, not sorrow, just a kind of quiet relief that a chapter was finally closed. "And his trial exposed corruption all the way to the territorial governor's office," Hayes continued. "3 judges removed, dozen officials charged. Your case, what happened to you, it started something bigger. Reform is coming, slowly, but coming." One person standing up can change everything, Matthias said. Diego taught me that. Ayanna proved it. She proved a lot of things, Hayes agreed. He looked at Ayanna, who sat on the porch with baby Kaya in her arms. She proved that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. She proved that dignity comes from choices, not from bloodlines. She proved that love is stronger than hate, and truth is more powerful than fear. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Matthias and Ayanna sat together on their porch. Kaya slept peacefully in her cradle. Rose was inside preparing dinner. Naichi sat by the fire, working on a bow for young Kaya to use when she was older. "Do you remember what you said the night before the trial?" Matthias asked. "You asked if I regretted coming down from the mountain." "I remember. I have a new answer now. Coming down from that mountain was the best decision I ever made, because it led me to you, to this." He gestured at the cabin, the small community growing around them, their daughter sleeping peacefully. "To a life worth living." "We saved each other," Ayanna said. "You gave me freedom to choose. I gave you a reason to live again. More than that, you gave me hope. You showed me that the future doesn't have to be haunted by the past." She took his hand. "Our daughter will grow up in a world we're helping to change. She'll know both her heritages. She'll be proud of where she comes from. And she'll know that her mother and father chose each other, chose love, chose to fight for what was right. The best legacy we could give her." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out one by one, brilliant points of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. Closer, an owl called. The world was alive with sounds of night. And in the cabin, surrounded by family, protected by love, with the future growing bright before them, Matthias Brennan and Ayanna Ramirez. Brennan had finally found what they had both been searching for without knowing it. They had found home. They had found peace. They had found each other. And in a world that had tried to tell them they did not belong together, they had built a place where everyone belonged, where blood and heritage did not matter as much as character and choice, where the past informed the future but did not control it. They had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of courage and dignity and love. And that was worth every struggle, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. That was worth everything. Years later, when travelers passed through the settlement that had grown around the Brennan cabin, they would stop at the small schoolhouse where children of every heritage learned their letters together. They would visit the clinic where a woman with Apache wisdom and white medical training healed the sick without asking about bloodlines. And if those travelers asked about the founders, the old-timers would smile. "Started with a wedding that looked like a hanging," they would say. "Ended with a love that changed this territory. The mountain man and the Apache bride proved something we all needed to see. That courage is stronger than fear. That choice is more powerful than force. That love can bridge any divide if you're brave enough to reach across it." On the hill above the settlement, 4 graves stood together under the aspens: Kaya, Samuel, Diego, and years later, when their time came, Matthias and Ayanna would rest beside them. A family reunited at last, bound not by blood alone, but by the choices they made and the legacy they left behind. Their daughter Kaya grew up to become a teacher. Their son Samuel, born 2 years later, became a lawyer who fought for the rights of mixed heritage families across the territory. Their grandchildren would live in a Colorado that was not perfect, but was better than the one their grandparents had fought to change. And in the small museum that the town eventually built, visitors could see the original marriage certificate. October 15, 1876, Matthias Brennan and Ayanna Ramirez, signed by Reverend Webb, witnessed by Sheriff Hayes. Below it, a placard read, "They called it a sale, but they called it a choice. And choice was what made them free." The mountain man and the Apache bride had become something the law books struggled to define and the history books couldn't ignore. They had become what they chose to be. They had become legend. They had become hope. They had become home.